Hey y'all! Thought we'd pop in today to talk about the top 10 crochet tips I really wish I had known sooner. Crochet looks deceptively simple when you first encounter it, even if all you're doing is crocheting a dishcloth. You have a hook, you have some yarn, and presumably you have enough optimism to believe those two objects will cooperate. Then you actually start crocheting and discover tension, gauge, yarn weights, mysterious extra stitches, missing stitches, and projects that somehow have become trapezoids despite nobody asking them to. There are plenty of things we eventually learn through experience, but experience is often just a polite word for doing something horribly wrong until you finally figure out why. So today we're skipping some of the character building nonsense and talking about 10 things that can make crochet easier, more comfortable, and considerably less likely to end with you glaring suspiciously at a ball of yarn. The first thing I wish I had known is that crochet hooks are not all created equal. Those inexpensive aluminum hooks absolutely work, and there's nothing wrong with starting with them, but you do not earn bonus crafting points for making your hands miserable. If you crochet regularly, ergonomic hooks can make an enormous difference because the larger, shaped grips can reduce how tightly you need to hold the hook. That can mean less hand fatigue during longer crochet sessions. And no, discomfort is not proof that you are a dedicated fiber artist. Nobody is going to appear at your door with a medal because you crocheted an entire blanket while gripping a skinny metal hook like you were trying to strangle it. Try different hook shapes, materials, and handles, because the best hook is ultimately the one that works comfortably with your particular hands and your crochet style. Second, learn to read your yarn labels, because those little pieces of paper are doing considerably more than preventing the skein from exploding in the yarn aisle. A yarn label can tell you the fiber content, yarn weight, yardage or meterage, recommended hook sizes, and care instructions. All of that matters because two yarns that look equally pretty on the shelf can behave completely differently once you start working with them. Cotton, wool, acrylic, and various blends have different amounts of stretch, drape, warmth, absorbency, and washability. The label can also help you calculate whether you have enough yarn before beginning a project, which is useful unless you enjoy yarn chicken, the exciting fiber art sport where you desperately race toward the final stitch while your remaining yarn becomes shorter, thinner, and increasingly judgmental. Read the label. It knows things. Third, I regret to inform everyone that gauge swatches actually have a purpose. I know, I was disappointed too. The gauge swatch feels like somebody standing between you and the project you actually want to make, saying, before you're allowed to have fun, please complete this small square of administrative crochet. But if you're making clothing, hats, fitted accessories, or anything where finished dimensions actually matter, checking your gauge can save you a tremendous amount of trouble. The hook size listed in a pattern is a recommendation, not a magical guarantee, because every crocheter has slightly different tension. If your stitches are tighter or looser than the designer's, your finished project can be dramatically different in size. 15 minutes spent checking gauge is considerably less annoying than finishing a beautiful adult sweater to discover you've accidentally made fashionable winter wear for a hamster. That brings us to tension, which is something beginners often assume you're supposed to immediately understand. You are not. Consistent yarn tension is a physical skill, and your hands need time to develop it. You have to discover how you like holding your yarn, how much pressure feels comfortable, and how to feed your yarn consistently while your other hand is busy operating the hook. Early stitches can be tight enough to survive a hurricane, followed immediately by stitches loose enough to have their own postal codes. That's normal. The goal isn't necessarily to crochet tightly or loosely. It's to crochet consistently. Eventually, your hands develop muscle memory and stop requiring quite so much conscious supervision. Until then, experiment with how you wrap and hold the yarn. Relax your hands when you notice yourself death gripping everything, and remember that uneven beginner stitches aren't evidence that you can't crochet. They're evidence that you're currently learning to crochet. Number 5 is extremely simple and extremely important. Count your stitches. Yes, even when you're absolutely positive you know how many stitches there are. Especially then, because confidence is apparently when the crochet gremlins strike. Accidentally adding or dropping stitches is one of the easiest ways to turn what should have been a rectangular scarf into something resembling a topographical map of an unfamiliar continent. Beginners frequently have trouble identifying the first and last stitches of a row, And those are common places for stitches to mysteriously appear or disappear. Stitch markers are incredibly useful for marking important stitches, round beginnings, repeats, or anything else you need to find later. And periodically stop and count. You don't necessarily have to obsessively count every single row of every single project forever, but checking regularly catches problems while they're still small enough that fixing them doesn't require reconsidering every life decision you've made since breakfast. And when counting reveals that something has gone horribly wrong, welcome to number 6. Frogging. Frogging simply means ripping stitches back so that you can redo them, and learning not to treat it as failure makes crochet considerably more enjoyable. Every crocheter eventually experiences that horrible moment when you notice a mistake 20 rows back and briefly attempt to negotiate with reality. Maybe no one will notice. Maybe it's a design feature. Maybe this blanket was always supposed to have one random cluster stitch floating in the middle of an otherwise perfect row. Sometimes you absolutely can leave a harmless mistake alone. But when it affects the structure or genuinely bothers you, ripping back is simply another crochet technique. You aren't erasing all your progress. You're correcting part of the construction. Pull the yarn, redo the stitches, and move forward. Although you are still completely entitled to complain dramatically while you're doing it. Frogging might be useful, but nobody said we had to enjoy watching 3 hours of work disappear. Number 7 is blocking, otherwise known as the mysterious stage where a project goes from, well, I suppose that's technically finished, to, oh, that's what it was supposed to look like. Blocking involves shaping your finished crochet, often with moisture or steam depending on the fiber in the project, so that the stitches settle and the piece reaches its intended dimensions. It is especially dramatic with lace because those beautiful open spaces may not fully reveal themselves until the piece is blocked. Granny squares can also become more consistent and easier to join after blocking because now they're actually straight and square. Just remember that different fibers respond differently, so use a blocking method appropriate for the yarn you're working with and be particularly careful with heat around synthetic fibers. Blocking can't solve every crochet problem, unfortunately. If you've accidentally made one sleeve 6 inches longer than the other, well, blocking is a finishing technique, not an exorcism. There's only so much help blocking is going to be. Number 8 on our list is that not every beautiful yarn is your friend, particularly when you're learning. Some yarn is gorgeous on the skein and absolute chaos on the hook. Very fuzzy, fluffy, eyelash, fancy, or heavily textured yarn can make individual stitches really difficult to see, which is not ideal when you're still trying to figure out where the hook is supposed to go. Dark yarn can present the same problem because the stitches become harder to distinguish. A smooth, light-colored, medium-weight yarn generally makes learning easier because you can actually see the anatomy of each stitch. Once you've developed more experience, you can start recognizing stitches partly by feel and can confidently venture into the yarn of questionable visibility. But there's absolutely no shame in making your early projects with yarn that allows you to see what you're doing. Learning crochet is challenging enough without playing Where's Waldo with every stitch. Number 9 is that patterns are instructions, but they're not sacred texts delivered from the yarn gods. When you're learning, following a pattern closely is incredibly useful because it teaches you how projects are constructed. Eventually, though, you begin understanding why those instructions work, and that's when crochet gets even more interesting. You can change colors, adjust lengths, add repeats, alter borders, combine ideas, and make a project better suited to what you actually want. Obviously, structural changes sometimes require a little mathematics, particularly with fitted garments or repeated stitch patterns, so don't randomly add 17 stitches to a sweater and then blame me when something peculiar happens. But developing the confidence to adapt patterns is an important step in becoming a more experienced crocheter. Eventually, you stop thinking only in terms of, what does this pattern tell me to do, and start asking, what happens if I do this? Occasionally, the answer is greatness. Occasionally, it's frogging. It happens. And number 10 might be the most important tip of all. Give yourself time to get good at this. Crochet videos and photographs can make the craft look effortless because you're often watching someone who has made thousands upon thousands of stitches. You're seeing the results of years of muscle memory, not their first afternoon holding a hook. Your first granny square might be crooked. Your first scarf might have suspicious edges. Your first stuffed animal might look as though it has witnessed unspeakable things. That's okay. Keep it anyway. Those early projects are evidence of where you started, and improvement becomes much easier to recognize when you stop expecting yourself to crochet like someone with 20 years of experience after 20 minutes. Celebrate learning a new stitch. Celebrate finishing something. Celebrate realizing halfway through a row that you've made a mistake instead of discovering it 6 hours later. That counts as progress too, and frankly deserves some cake. The wonderful thing about crochet is that there's always another skill to learn, another technique to try, and another project capable of convincing us that purchasing 17 more skeins of yarn is somehow completely reasonable. Good tools help. Understanding yarn helps. Gauge, tension, stitch counting, frogging, blocking, and choosing sensible materials all make the technical side easier. But experience is what eventually connects everything together. The things that initially require enormous concentration gradually become automatic, leaving more mental space for creativity and experimentation. You begin recognizing stitches without thinking about them, understanding how fabric is being constructed, and spotting problems before they become catastrophic. Of course, none of this prevents you from occasionally staring at a project wondering what on earth you were doing 3 rows ago. We're crocheters, not sorcerers, although untangling a particularly nasty yarn knot probably qualifies as minor witchcraft. Well, y'all, that's about it. Drop a comment and tell me which crochet lesson you wish someone had taught you sooner, or share the mistake that taught you the lesson the hard way, because those stories are usually much funnier once enough time has passed and we've forgiven the yarn. Maybe you discovered gauge only after creating a hat large enough to cover a watermelon. Maybe you learned about stitch markers after your blanket slowly developed diagonal edges that nobody ordered. Or maybe you're still emotionally recovering from the first time somebody explained that yes, you really should make that gauge swatch. Whatever it was, I would love to hear about it, because fiber crafting is basically a community of people passing along useful knowledge while quietly maintaining yarn stashes that could insulate a modest-sized house. Happy stitching!